Welcome to the NBA 2K G-League show. I am your host, Varun Chari, and welcome to the show. So, on today's video, we are going to be talking about the 2024 NBA G-League draft. And yes, we have probably a decent amount to talk about, so I'll just kind of go through some of the big things that happened in today's draft. So, talking about guys like Matt Ryan, Landry, Shamet, the trade with Colin Castleton, and just many more things. So, get straight into it. So, Westchester Knicks, they drafted Matt Ryan and Landry Shamet. Now, that's important because Landry Shamet was with the New York Knicks during the training camp. If you don't know, Landry Shamet had unfortunately, I believe, dislocated his shoulder, and he, I think, is trying to avoid surgery and hoping that he can opt in to just continue to keep playing and maybe just rehab. And so he'll rehab with Westchester Knicks, along with Kevin McCullough Jr., who was their second-round pick and their two-way contract player from Kansas, is also still rehabbing an injury with Westchester. Now, Matt Ryan is notable because he's somebody that could potentially get a two-way spot if they convert Ariel Hukporti. So, Matt Ryan, if you don't know, I believe he's like a 6'10 shooter, and I think he shot like maybe 40% from three last year. He was with the Pelicans, the Lakers, the Timberwolves. He actually has a crazy story where I believe he was a DoorDash driver right after he won undrafted in college. So pretty cool story and pretty cool to see how he's gradually kind of made a career in the NBA. So he'll spend time with the Westchester Knicks as the number one pick. And if you're the Westchester Knicks, you're now looking at 9 roster spots, including Landry Shamet as well. And so you had 3 guys coming back from Westchester, like Jamal Bay, Kevin, I think, or Michael Harden, I believe, and I know there was one more player. But now G League rosters do have to be set at 10 players. So 2 of those guys will need to get cut. And I think there were a few players they brought in as like tryout players. And so some guys will unfortunately not make the Westchester Knicks this year. Their team is just super stacked. If you also don't know, they have TJ Warren as well, Chuma Okeke, and also in addition, Damian Baugh, who they traded for South Bay and was with the New York Knicks during Summer League. Alex O'Connell, who played, I believe, for the Stockton Kings maybe 2 years ago. But he's coming back kind of from overseas. And Boo Buie, who the Knicks actually signed in Exhibit 10. And it's probably going to be the point guard for this Westchester Knicks team, especially if they have if they don't have Tyler Kolek playing on this team. If Boo Buie is playing as the starting point guard, I am really curious who's going to be the backup point guard on his team. And maybe that's who you fill up with your 10th roster spot. So some things to keep in mind. Alright, so the next thing I want to talk about is the Sean East trade at 3 with Chandler Hutchinson at 5 and Colin Castleton. So this was a 3-team trade. If you don't know anything about Chandler Hutchinson, he was drafted by the Chicago Bulls in 2018 in the second round and was eventually traded by the Bulls to the Wizards in 2021, was eventually cut, and then the Phoenix Suns signed him on a 2-way, cut him, and then he played for the Sioux Falls Skyforce, and he actually then retired. So it was kind of big news when it was dropped, I believe, like 3-4 days ago, that he was actually coming out of retirement to enter the G League draft, and now he was drafted 5 in this year's draft. Now, what is notable about this trade is it was a 3-team trade because Sean East II, who was reported to agree to, I believe, an Exhibit 10 with the Los Angeles Lakers, and he did play for the Lakers Summer League team. Nothing really came of that, and I believe he was the only player who was reported to agree to an Exhibit 10 that just never ended up happening. So here it works out where the Lakers were able to trade Colin Castleton to the Long Island Nets, who was an intriguing prospect, a good center, had a good summer league. And, he shows potential to be a guy who has the playmaking ability as a center who can pass and can roll. And I think, there's things that I like about Castleton's game. And I think Long Island definitely needed a center on this roster. Somebody maybe that Patrick Gardner maybe as your backup center and Castleton as your main center. I think this creates more depth to the team. So I think this was a good pickup for Brooklyn, who can take swings on young guys who, as you're kind of going through a rebuild process and trying to find guys that they can hopefully draft or find in the G League process as you're going through this rebuild. So Sean East now gets to stay with South Bay. Chandler Hutchinson adds some more depth to the Cleveland Charge as they continue on with their season. All right, so the next film I'm going to talk about is the Rip City Remix drafting Tyree Darlin, who is a really interesting prospect. He was playing with G League Ignite this past year. He was somebody that Pooh Jeter, if you don't know who he is, he's the assistant GM of the Rip City Remix. But what's notable is that he actually played for G League Ignite from 2021 to 2023, which were the 2 years that Scoot Henderson was part of the team before Scoot got drafted to the Trailblazers last summer. I would imagine Pooh Jeter probably knows guys with G League Ignite, even though he wasn't there this past year and he was with the Trailblazers last year. I would imagine he still has connections, still has contacts within the G League Ignite, and probably has scouted Darlin before and is aware of him. So it's a really good swing to take a guy like Darlin, who's a young player who the Trailblazers could draft next year's draft. And it's worth a swing. And so I think this was a great move by Rip City. And it's kind of a similar case. If you look at, what happened with London Johnson, he actually got drafted by the Maine Celtics, who I really felt they needed a point guard with their roster. And I think this is a great pickup, especially somebody who's young and maybe gets drafted in next year's draft. Maybe Boston takes him in the second round. It's just worth a swing to take these young guys. And I think now that we don't have any more G League Ignite, this isn't an option where these young guys that maybe don't want to go to college or might not play overseas, if they still think they want to play in the G League, can just go through the G League draft process and end up going to a G League team and trying to work on getting better, while then hoping that it will help their draft stock when the draft comes around. Something I always think is really cool is when guys like Tyler Perry out of Kansas State get drafted by the 905 with, I believe it was the 15th or the 14th pick in the draft. Tyler Perry played for the Raptors in Summer League, so it was a cool little reunion, as they actually said on their social media. And I think this is a great move for the 905 to bring in somebody that they liked in the Summer League. And the 905 even said on social media, like Tyler Perry was their guy. He is who they wanted at 15. And I think it's always cool that we're kind of seeing this trend of like Sean East II, Tyler Perry, for these teams to really go after and try to give them the draft if they kind of can't because of all the limitations with the Exhibit 10 and affiliate players. And so I think this was a cool move and just worth a shot of them seeing what they can continue to do with Tyler Perry since they're familiar with his game. Now, to any Knicks fans listening to this, if you are familiar with a guy named Alonzo Trier, well, he was drafted in the second round of this year's draft by the Rio Grande Valley Vipers, which is Houston's G League team. With Rio Grande Valley, they traded away Jared Culver this season. I do like the idea of bringing Alonzo Trier. He's somebody who can score the ball, kind of like what Culver was doing last year. And, I don't believe Trier has played any basketball, at least professionally, in the past few years. So the last time he really played was with the Iowa Wolves. And he was drafted number 4 in the 2021 G League draft by the Iowa Wolves. So it's cool to see him trying to get a comeback this year in the G League and kind of see what he continues to do with his career. Okay, a really cool thing that stood out to me was that the Capital City Go-Go drafted 2 legends, 2 legacy players of big NBA legends, guys. Like, they drafted DJ Rodman, who is Dennis Rodman's son. On top of that, they also drafted Jaden Hardaway, which, if Hardaway, sounds really familiar. Oh yeah, Penny Hardaway's son. So yes, they have drafted 2 guys, legacy players, which is really interesting to see what's going to happen. The Go-Go with these 2 guys that were drafted are 11 players now. What I think is also interesting about it is Cody Topper was actually an assistant coach for the University of Memphis, and Penny Hardaway's been the head coach of Memphis since 2018. So he's definitely familiar with Jaden Hardaway. He probably has ties with him, and they reunite in DC. So I'm not surprised that this pick was made. This is actually, this makes a lot of sense. So that is one thing I'm kind of wondering about going into camp and the regular season. Who is getting cut from the 11 guys on this team? So there's something to keep in mind, but pretty cool to see that the Go-Go had drafted 2 guys that are sons of some big NBA legends. For the last part of this video, we're going to talk about 2 players who didn't go drafted in this year's draft, and that is Andre Ingram and Zaire Wade, who is the son of NBA legend Dwayne Wade. So Andre Ingram is a really long G-League vet. He's played for the South Bay Lakers, and I think he played for the Utah Flash to start his career off. But Andre Ingram, if you don't know, got called up to the Los Angeles Lakers in 2018, and then also to the Lakers in 2019 when he had some injuries. He had the really big story about being the guy being in the G League for so long. He was a physics tutor or physics teacher. He played at American University, actually, and he finally got his call up in 2018. That was a really big story at the time that year, in April. So, he last year didn't play for South Bay because he had some injuries and he had some personal things going on with his family. And so he was eligible. I guess South Bay technically would have had his rights, but I guess they just didn't want to bring him back. They might not have had the room. So usually in that case, then his rights just would expire and he would be a free agent in the G League. So he wasn't picked up, but he's somebody who can really shoot the rock. I mean, I think he's actually won the G League 3-point contest at one point. So yeah, he was somebody who went undrafted. Zaire Wade also was a notable name, and what's notable is he played for the Salt Lake City Stars in 2021 to 2022, and then I believe he played in, I think, the African League last year in Cape Cod or Cape Town. So he hasn't had a chance yet to really play in the G League for a long extended period of time, but he's a 6'1" point guard. He hasn't actually entered the NBA draft, and the thing that might make the most sense for him is really to go overseas. And if he can really improve and continue to show what he can do overseas, he might actually have a chance to come back in the G League, and maybe a team could take a swing on him. And if he does end up declaring for a draft, and he would be eligible, like at least probably this year. I mean, he is 22, so I know he definitely could play. It's just he hasn't really declared yet, probably because he's been wanting to get more experience, and maybe he's trying to work on bringing up his draft stock for the NBA. So there's something to keep in mind moving forward. But I think that's going to be it for this video. Just want to get a really quick video with today's G League draft. And yeah, the season is coming up, guys. So really, really excited. Let me know your comments below. I'd like to know what you thought about today's draft. And if you like this video, feel free to subscribe, like, or dislike, because hey, you do you. So this is Varun Charya. I am the host of the NBA 2K G League show, and peace